All right, everybody, let's get today's program started. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Lunchtime Discovery Series. It is good to be with you. Happy holidays, everybody, from us here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and from the folks at the North Carolina Office of Environmental Education. It's the folks over in the Department of Environmental Quality who organize the Lunchtime Discovery Series. They do the incredible work every week of finding cool people, interesting people with great stories to come and share their knowledge and insights and expertise with us here at the museum through our YouTube channel and sometimes inside our museum as well in the Daily Planet Theater. But it's great to be with you. My name is Chris Smith. I'm the coordinator for current science programs at the museum, and I am your host for this series, the Lunchtime Discovery Series. Welcome. Today, we've got a very interesting program for you. Raise your hand wherever you're at if you've ever heard of the Bug House Laboratory. Maybe not. Like, I think of myself as a museum person, but I did not know that in North Carolina there was a place at one time called the Bug House Laboratory. Sounds fun, right? Sounds interesting. And that even our museum, the Museum of Natural Sciences, has some shared history with this fascinating and interesting looking place, the Bug House in Washington, North Carolina, in that apparently the director of the museum at the time, Herbert Hutchinson Brimley, we call him H.H. Brimley, I think in his words, he said, wow, the Bug House is a pretty cool thing. Everybody should go see it and check it out. I don't know if that's what he actually said. But the people who do know what he said about it and the work that went on there and who have been working to protect and preserve the stories of this interesting place are joining me today on the program for the Lunchtime Discovery Series. Let me bring him into the program now. First up, everybody meet Stephen Farrell. He's the curator of special collections in the George H. and Laura E. Brown Library. Hi, Stephen.
Hello there.
And today we'll also be hearing from Ray Midgett, the vice president of the Historic Port of Washington Project. Hi, Ray.
Hey, hi, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
Appreciate you both taking time to join us today and share these stories with us. Sometimes I feel like I know at least a little bit about what we're going to talk about. Today, I am completely out at sea, which means I have a lot to learn today. So I'm very excited. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. The Bug House Laboratory had its beginning in simpler times during the Depression in the United States. And it began in the summer of 1923. This is a quote from Elizabeth Yurt Sterling's. It all began in the summer of 1923 before the airliners war invaded the skies. And when the biggest thrill a small town boy knew was the clang of an ice wagon on the street. We have a picture of the ice wagons in Washington. Eventually, Elizabeth Yurt Sterling gathered together most of the paperwork, a lot of the paperwork in the magazine that the Bug House published, their records and so forth, and compiled it into basically a history of it. And a lot of the information that we found in this book. I just want to point out where we are, Washington. If you don't know where Washington is, or it's known as Little Washington, or the locals like to say the original Washington, we are located on the Pamlico River. We're at the point where the Tar River flows down from Tarboro and to Washington. And at that point, when you go under US Highway 17 bridge, it becomes the Pamlico River. This is a shot of Washington. It's where the flowing Tar River meets the Pamlico River and becomes a little bit more salty as it flows down to the east towards Pamlico Sound. It all began in 1923 when the four boys, George, what was George's last name?
Ross.
George Ross, John Radcliffe, and Brady and Dick Dunstan organized a club and began collecting and mounting displaying specimens of insects and small animals in a small tent. The lads made multiple field trips to collect wildlife samples in the area, and soon the clubhouse, which was in a tent, was packed. By 1926, the boys decided they needed more space. So they decided to relocate their collection to an old detached kitchen in one of their parents' yard. One day, a young girl came by the clubhouse and she looked around and looked at all of the different mounted specimens and declared, "What is this, a bug house?" The boys thought it was an okay name and adopted it for their organization. And from that point on, they were known as the Bug House Boys. The collection continued to grow. Within a year, the boys moved into a wooden shack. A light on a pole signaled that members were present and the public could visit to see what was happening. And this is what you're looking at is a diagram or a drawing of the shack, which sat out here on 5th Street in Washington. And you can see the pole with the light on the top of it that they used to signal that somebody was there and you could come visit. And this is a photo taken of the inside of that shack showing the collection of wildlife and mounted specimens and other artifacts. Here's a photo from a few years later and showing the membership had grown from those 4 boys to up to, I think maybe we see in here 10 or 11 of the boys. And those first 4 boys are basically the 4 on the back row to the left. And they have grown a few years, and we have 4 younger boys in front. Growth continued, and in December of 1929, the members decided they needed more space, and so they approached the city of Washington and asked if they could use some underutilized rooms in the city hall for their museum. The new downtown location provided better exposure and allowed for public access. In the upstairs of City Hall, which you see in the sketch, was the mayor's courtroom, and that is where the city council or aldermen would meet. But the Bug House Boys used that as an auditorium for their lectures. One of their mentors was a science teacher at Washington High School. His name was Dr. B.B. Brandt, and by the time he led them to the expansion to be 30 to 40 members that included by this time girls as well as boys. And Dr. B.B. Brandt went on to be a professor, I think, of zoology at Duke University. And here's Mr. Herbert Hutchinson Brimley. He was also served as a mentor for the group, and he suggested to them that maybe perhaps they should join the American Association of Museums, which they did. And after they joined that association, the association suggested that they needed to come up with a more formal name, and that's where they came up with the Washington Field Museum. And so the official name became the Washington Field Museum, sponsored by the Bug House Laboratory. Excuse me. Mr. Brimley also, not only was he a member, he was a mentor. He was also a contributing member, and he paid his $2 a year to the Bug House Laboratory. The museum continued to grow. They got too big for the city hall, and they approached the city again, and the city agreed to allow them to build a new museum building at the new city park, which was out on Jacks Creek on the east end of town, and to become eventually the Bughouse Park. But of course, money had to be raised. They went about a couple of different ways to raise the money. They built a model of the proposed building, and they displayed it in a downtown drugstore. And to raise money, they would allow people to buy a log that was going to be in the building. But this was going to be a log type structure. And if you bought a log, you would get your name engraved on that log once the building was constructed. They took field trips to collect frogs to sell them to Duke University for laboratory use. They even captured frogs and sent frog legs to a restaurant in Washington, D.C. And they also sponsored a musical, The Dixie Birds, and it proved to be profitable. And finally, enough money was raised and the building was built with the Work Progress Administration assistance. And in 1934, November 1934, the building was open. And they had a grand opening and invited dignitaries and members and the general public to come and tour the building. And here's a photo colorized of the building shortly after it was opened. Part of the work that had to be done then was to move the exhibits from City Hall to the Bug House or the Field Museum. And these are just some photos taken of the interior and the exhibits after they had moved in. They even eventually had an outdoor zoo where they captured mammals and displayed them in the zoo. This is, of course, a black bear. They also had foxes, and they had birds. They had eagles, bald eagles, and I think they eventually had an alligator. Not only was it a nature museum, it was also a history museum. And this is a ship's model that was built by someone and donated. And the young lady that you see there, her name was Mary Shelburne, and she was one of the Bug House members, and she actually worked there in the late 30s and as sort of the manager of it. From 1937 to 1941, Washington held the Tulip Festival every April when the tulip bulbs started to come up. It was in celebration of the Dutch community that had moved into the eastern part of Beaufort County and started growing tulips and daffodils for sale. And so it was a big event. In 1937 through 1941, there were sometimes 10 to 15,000 visitors in town. The different businesses and organizations and groups and clubs in town would build floats, and there would be a grand parade down Main Street. The Bug House Park was a key part of that celebration. There were many activities there, and in this photo, you can see the actual building on Jacks Creek in the background. And so I wanted to show you that so that you would be able to understand what you're seeing in this next video. we were very fortunate to find the film that was taken in the 1939 Tulip Festival, and be able to get it digitally restored, and because it shows us quite a bit of what Washington was like back at that time, and also the ability for us to see how the Bughouse Park was used as a part of that celebration. The Bughouse Park received accolades for quite a number of the work that they were doing. They actually the members went out and they were able to identify a new species of frog named in honor of C.S. Brimley, which was H.H. Brimley's brother, who was C.S. Brimley was a zoologist. And the frog was named, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the Latin name, but it was commonly known as the Brimley chorus frog. They held the honor of having at one time the largest collection of living reptiles in the state of North Carolina, numbering up to 412 specimens. And this remarkable collection was due to the efforts of Churchill Burgaw, an expert reptile collector and one of the Bughouse boys. There were stories written about the Bughouse in national magazines. Our state magazine was one of them, and also written up in publications that were tied to the American Association of Museums. The first known hatching of a baby horned owl occurred in the park, and the Associated Press spread the news around the country. And an ornithologist from New York actually came down and visited the Bughouse to observe the event. They gave a Rotary, they would give talks to different clubs in town. And at one Rotary club, they actually shared that they had 25,600 visitors registered at the museum on Charlotte Street in the previous year. But with the event of World War II, most members were called to serve in their country, and the Bughouse Laboratory closed. And I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to tell you that story, part of the story.
All right, thank you, everyone. So World War II obviously changed the entire world. And here in Washington, in its own sense, a lot of things that were in the pre-war years had to take a back seat for the betterment of the war effort. Things such as the Tulip Festival took a back seat, as well as, unfortunately, the Bughouse Laboratory as an organization. So the majority of the boys or men at this point joined the war effort, and the girls and the women went into the USO programs. So in April, so starting out in 1941, let's go to 1942, the Bughouse still had younger members, and those were still actively meeting and having monthly meetings. They're still having programs at the Bughouse, but they saw that the community needed something and a place to go that would benefit the war effort. And so the city and the townspeople got together and decided that, the Bughouse Laboratory, the Washington Field Museum as a structure, would be a great place to use as a recreation center. And the city alderman came together with the young men who were still part of the Bughouse organization, and they decided that in April of 1943 that the Bughouse Laboratory as an organization was going to turn over the building to the city. The city then looked at it and said, well, now that we have a recreation center, let's partner with other local organizations and promote this as a community center, as well as a USO location. So as the war progressed, you saw more of the original members going off to war. I'm going to read you a quote in 1943 by George Ross. PFC George Ross wrote from Kessler Field in Mississippi. He wrote to Harold Yurt back here in Washington that, quote, "I hope that we can take care of the thing we have there after this dang thing is over. We will again do our part for our community, and we always have, in which we are justly proud of. We maintain a first-class museum in spite of the public, and we can do it again, and we will." And during the war, as of 1943, the young men are already planning to reopen the Washington Field Museum. Here's a picture of the gentleman that was just mentioned, who was an incredible ornithologist, Churchill Burgaw. And this is the tragedy that struck many small towns across the United States and abroad. Churchill Burgaw was killed in action in Italy. One of only two of the Bug House members that lost their life in the service of their nation during World War II, the other being Oscar Gordon Wallace. These two members were the only paid members or members of the organization previous to the war or during the war that lost their life in the service of their nation. So on May 1st, 1944, you'll see that the USO leased the Bug House facility from the city of Washington. Now, what's interesting is that what we touched on earlier is that the Bug House Laboratory as an organization had been given the opportunity to create their museum on city property. So they didn't actually own the property in which their structure was on. So when the Bug House Laboratory met in 1943 as an organization and turned the building over to the city, now the city owns the property and the building. That is when the city aldermen looked to the USO and a local organization of women named the Spinsters Club. Now, this organization lasted many, many years, but its real heyday was during the war. You can actually see a picture of some of the women in the Spinsters Club, and there was very strict rules to be in the Spinsters Club. Obviously, you had to be a single woman, and upon your engagement to be married, you were kicked out. They actually had a party, and you were no longer allowed to attend the Spinster Club activities. But this group of young ladies saw a vision with the USO, and in April of 1944, almost a year to the date of when the Bug House Laboratory as an organization turned over their facility, plans were made by the Spinsters Club and the USO to spend $13,500 to create a recreational wing attached to the original building. In the 1940s, there was an argument made that the log cabin started deteriorating. It was constructed with WPA money with the help of these boys. And so there wasn't a whole lot of structural integrity to the building without a proper upkeep. So plans were made for city taxpayers' money as well as federal money through the USO to make an addition to make proper upgrades to have a fully functioning USO facility. Keep in mind that the Spinsters Club only used the facility on the weekends, and that is when service members could come from Jacksonville or local military bases with the Coast Guard could come and dance. They could come and have parties. And during the weekdays, they looked at the facility as a recreation facility for teens. Local teens could then go there during the weekdays and have bingo or play volleyball and use it for a more accessible recreation facility for these teens to have somewhere to go. On February 24th of 1945, the USO opened the new edition of the Bug House, and you'll see this in a future picture. And they named it the Spinsters Hall of all names. I actually have here with us today in our archives the dedication of Spinsters Hall. And I'm going to read an excerpt from it. It is naturally with a great deal of pride that we, the girls of the Spinsters Club, who have tried as best we could during these past 3.5 years to provide and look after the servicemen who have come to Washington. Here, our mayor has named this hall the Spinsters Hall. This social hall has been a dream and a hope of ours for over 12 months, not only to provide more room for our weekend activities, but for our community in the years to come. And now this part at the end is really where the story is going to lead you. Fellows, my next thoughts are not mentioned in an attempt to crowd you from our hearts, but it is only natural that all of us are thinking that soon our boys will be coming home, and we know that this community center will be a place of their own. Now, she's referencing the original boys of the Bug House Laboratory. We trust that they will share our feeling of this place and will let us continue to enjoy it with them. We want these boys to realize that this center is theirs, for it is meant to be a place that will serve our community. So, as of the dedication of the new recreation addition to the building, plans are already being in motion by the local population to create a civic center. You can see the wheels are turning to keep that facility used as a civic center, and looking at the Washington Field Museum as something of a pre-war institution. So on August 26th of 1945, the room was dedicated. And then if you know your history, between August 26th of 1945 and the end of World War II is only 7 days. And so the Bug House Laboratories facility, the Washington Field Museum, was only being used by the USO and the Spinsters Club for 7 days during the war. And so if we go back in time and we see how in 1943, the young men and women of the Bug House Laboratory organization turned over the facility to be used by the city, it said upon the end of the war. And so we have a letter from September 3rd, 24 hours after the signing of the surrender of Imperial Japan to the United States and Allied forces, that the Bug House Laboratory is asking for their structure back, because their deal was that they would allow the USO and the city and the Spinsters to use that facility until the war's end. So in less than 24 hours, they were ready to get back to the Washington Field Museum and resume programs. This did not sit well, obviously, with the community, because over the last 190 days, it's been used as a community center here in Washington. And a lot of the parents of the teenagers who've been utilizing the facilities, along with the Spinsters Club and the USO, they're all seeing this as more of a new era of use for this structure and this community center. Now, remind you, the Bug House Laboratory organization built their structure on city property. They actually didn't have a right or deed to the land in which they built their structure. So now that the city owns the building now, since it's been turned over, as well as the property, it has come down to the decision of the Board of Aldermen. So the Board of Aldermen agreed that they will give the structure back to the Bug House Laboratory organization, and that was met with a lot of social upheaval within the community. Everyone had grown used to it being a civic center, and they were looking to keep that going. There were arguments from both sides, one from the Bug House Laboratory organization as well as the community, that said public support has waned for this bug house idea and this museum, and now it's time to look into the post-war era and looking at it as a more of a opened facility for the entire community to utilize. That lasted about 17 days, and that 17 days of letters to the editor and conversations behind closed doors out in the open with the aldermen, with community leaders. The Bug House Laboratory met on September 20th of 1945, only 17 days after the request to have their structure back and their museum back. They met and they decided that, look, it's not worth the social upheaval, and it's not worth tarnishing the name of the original Bug House Laboratory and Washington Field Museum to continue to fight in a public sphere. So the men and women met, and they decided that it would be better suited to go ahead and relinquish any title that they may believe they had to the facility. I want to back it up just a second. You may be wondering, what happened to all those display cases? What happened to all of that material? What happened to all the bears and alligators that were mentioned earlier? Well, upon the relinquishing of the Bug House to the city sent in, workers, just anybody that they could find to go in and haul everything out. And when they did that, the workers didn't know the historical relevance. They didn't understand what they were doing. They actually took it out by force, and they stored it in the National Guard armory. That's where we're going to get back to what I was just saying. When the meeting was held September 20th to relinquish the Bug House material, they were being held in the National Guard armory amongst all of their old possessions. And so the city aldermen, they agreed that that they appreciated the kind donation of the facility and all of its material to be used as a community center. And unfortunately, about a year later, on October 11th, 1946, the last remaining members of the Bug House Committee met above the National Guard armory, which was only a few hundred yards from the Bug House facility. They met and they decided that that was going to be the end of the organization and its belongings and its role within the city. So on November 7th of 1946, all the items were officially turned over to the city. And only a few days or a few weeks later, the National Guard themselves, seeing the need for the storage, went in and took all of those taxidermied animals, all of those display cases, all of those historic items that had all been placed in the care of those young men and women, and they put it onto the street. All of those items were put onto the sidewalk on East Main Street and were then pillaged by the common man or woman walking down the street as to what they wanted in it. One of the most fascinating items, I believe, amongst many, was a local Washington man was living in Pearl Harbor, working as a civilian contractor, and had picked up a cylinder head from the very first Japanese airplane to be shot down at Pearl Harbor, which crashed into the hospital on the airstrip at Pearl Harbor. And he brought that in 1942 back to Washington and donated that to the Bug House Laboratory. And ever since working on this project, I've always thought, what happened to that cylinder head? It was left on the sidewalk, and it was, probably disposed of without knowing the relevance or the provenance of that. Moving forward, the city used the facility for many years as a Parks and Rec facility. It started the actual Parks and Rec department that is here today, and you can actually see a picture of it here with swings, and you can see how it's been aged up to the 1970s. And in 1981, due to the creation of the extension of 3rd Street over Jacks Creek, a wing of the building was actually demolished. And in 1981, seeing that the building had served its purpose and there was no longer a need to repair or replace anything on the facility, the city agreed that they were going to demolish the building. Now, what's neat is that in 1981, upon the demolishing of the Washington Field Museum structure, somebody in an excavator hit a power pole, and it knocked power out across the city. And one local citizen claimed nothing to worry about here. It was just the old bug house saying its last goodbyes. And upon that destruction, the city looked to use it now as a recreational park. And 2 years ago, in 2022, Ray and myself were asked by the city and the local Rotary Club to create historic markers for the commemorating the old bug house laboratory in the Washington Field Museum. This is a picture taken this week of the new pickleball courts and the new tennis courts. And as you can see on your left, you see where the road is curved. That is that wing that I just mentioned that was torn down. It used to sit in where that road thoroughfare is. You can see what's cute is the new Bug House Park, as they so properly named it. It's all children's park toys, all in the shape of bugs. And so that was a neat to take back to harken back to an older time.
Let me interject. So if you look at this photo, you can see the circular object at the bottom of the photo. That is the actual fountain that was in front of the bug house when it was still active. And basically the playground that you see is in the approximate position where the actual building was.
And as you can see here, the Bug House Laboratory marker states the Washington Field Museum, known as the Bug House Laboratory from 1923 to 1946, was the largest amateur museum in the United States, and it was started by the youth of this city. This marker stands as a testament to what those young men and women were able to accomplish virtually on their own and put their mark on the history of Washington, North Carolina, as well as the United States and the world at large. You can see here, we put informational signs along with various pictures and incorporated all the insects and bugs as a more in-depth signage, wayfinding sign, to tell that story and to keep that memory alive of what those boys and girls of Washington did and what their impact on the city was, even to this day. And
questions?
Stephen, Ray, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us, Chris.
Thank you. I want to share one other thought before if we have any questions.
Yeah.
One of the most remarkable things I think about this whole project of the Field Museum, the Bug House, is the fact that it was completely perceived by young boys and girls. The first group, 4 boys, were like 14 years old. They grew into older teenagers and young adults, and they continue to work this. There wasn't any adult, quote, supervision for this project. On their own, they organized it. They came up with the what they called the Constitution. They raised the money. They went out and brought in the folks that they would sponsor people to come in and talk. And the whole thing again was all youth oriented. And I just think that's remarkable that they were able to accomplish that.
I agree. That, to me, that seems like one of the most inspirational parts of the story, that a group of young people create something that for those roughly 20 years becomes such a valuable asset to the community, or at least for those years, especially leading up to World War II. That, I mean, what was the number? 25,000 people in a year came through to see their exhibits and displays. Like, that's incredible.
Right.
It was placed on an Esso roadmap. That if you look into the 1930s Esso road maps down Highway 17, you'll see a bug right there on top of Washington, and it says to stop and see the Washington Field Museum.
Mm-hmm. And well, I mean, and I'm also astounded, like, I our museum here in downtown Raleigh has 300,000 square feet of space, and we have, I think it's over 1,000 live animals in our care here between reptiles, amphibians, insects, arthropods, and other critters that people and fish that people come and see. But for this space in Washington to have collections over 400 live reptiles and amphibians that people can come and see, and that would be all local wildlife too. Like the way that people would have had opportunity to connect with the environment and with nature that was also in their community, I feel like is really special. Like I can see why Brimley would be so enamored with this place because I feel like they shared similar ethic around science, nature, the environment, and also sharing. Uh, do you see evidence of that in the research that you've done too?
Well, if you look at the pure tenacity of these young men and women, that they got up every morning and would go and feed all of these animals, and they would find the insects and all. I mean, the dedication to come to the bug house to take care of all of those animals, to see that all of them are laying eggs or giving birth. And that was not any paid positions. That was just out of the goodness of their heart. And you think about today, trying to get a child to feed the dog. These are 400 animals that these men and boys and girls took care of. In the research, we have found that they never locked the doors to the facility because there were so many youth that were a part of it. They couldn't have that many keys. So as a community space, the Washington Field Museum, it was open. And so the people of the community respected it so much that they took care of it. Obviously, in its up into the 1940s when it changed hands. So what a testament to the young people here in town and their personal sacrifice to keep that organization as well as the facility up and running.
I want to share some stuff with y'all that's coming into the chat too from our viewers, and remind our viewers you can pop your questions and comments into the chat. I've got it pulled up so I can see what's going on there. But watching the program today is our research curator for herpetology, Brian Stewart, and here's what he wrote. He said, "Wonderful talk, excellent job. Just a note." We have at least one specimen from the Bug House Laboratory still here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences Reptile and Amphibian Collection. That specimen is a preserved Neuse River water dog, a salamander, and it is the first specimen formally cataloged into the herpetology collection as NCSM 0001.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
That's pretty cool.
Wow.
That's incredible.
It's incredible that these young men and women were able to do something like that, and that lasting impact is still there, and it's even in this. It reached all the way to Raleigh, and it made such an impact as number one. That's amazing.
Number one. So another question for you: did any of the Bug House members go on to careers in science or conservation, and if not, what about their descendants?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, as a matter of fact, the one that I do know that did go into the study of plants, botany, was Churchill Burgall. Churchill Burgall went to NC State, and I believe there's still a dorm named for Churchill Burgall at NC State. And he was a leading botanist in there while in college, and he wound up taking a job after his graduation from NC State down in Wilmington. And he is responsible for the large azaleas that were planted in the plantation.
Horton.
The Horton plantation. That was Churchill Burgall. And he's unfortunately the one who lost his life in the service of the country in Italy. So we do know that he did go on. There's also neat excerpts at the end of the Bug House Laboratory history book, and it states that
Which one?
about John Cotton Taylor. It states that on August 13th of 1952, many will remember the Bug House, which later became, for dignity's sake, the Washington Field Museum. It has been gone these many years, but its influence is still remain, as demonstrated this past week by an accident at the local hospital. Mr. Bergall wrote that Dr. John Cotton Taylor, who called on Harold Yurt to come quick to the hospital and identify a snake that had bitten a child. Dr. Taylor wanted to know if it was poisonous so they could give the child the serum. Harold in turn called Mary Shelburne McLaurin, knowing that she more of an authority of reptiles than he. Mrs. McLaurin drove to the hospital and upon arriving found an anxious group of nurses. The father of the child had the dead snake in a paper bag, and when Mary opened the bag, she said at once, "Copperhead and poisonous. Give the serum." Miss McLaurin then took the snake out of the bag, laid it on the floor, and then showed those present how she identified it. So they were still teaching others and their passion for reptiles, even years later into adulthood. And the last quote is, "The Bug House is gone. The war took most of the boys who had started it, and in succeeding years brought other changes that finally resulted in the closing. It was a wonderful institution, and it's good to know that its influence has not entirely passed away." Washington Daily News, August 1952. So even if they didn't go into a professional setting, all those boys and girls who turned into men and women still went on to practice what their early adolescence had taught them.
That's incredible. Just what a great story all the way around. You mentioned the city wanted to, they in the 80s, they tear the thing down. They need to demolish it. And then in more recent years, they decide to continue to use it as community space, but as community outdoor space. Was that the impetus to actually dig into the story of the Washington Field Museum, or is this a project y'all been working on for a while?
I think that was the impetus. Don't you agree?
I do too. As a matter of fact, outside of the door in the office I'm in right now, I have a hand-painted picture of the Bug House framed on the door when you walk into the John A. Wilkinson History Room at the library. And it's it's almost mythical in proportions that people around here who are not even old enough to have gone into it, but they remember it either as the recreation center, or those even, you'd have to be born after 1981. They still talk about it. So it still holds a place in Washington's heart. And if many of the locals, if they weren't a part of it, they knew somebody who were. And it's still talked about to this day. And every once in a while, we'll have someone in their 90s, mid 90s, that will come in and we'll just ask them that real question: did you ever go inside the Bug House? And oftentimes they'll say yes. They'll remember as a very little child, but it again still holds a place in all of our hearts. And now it's a park, and it's been a community center since 1934. So that again tells the provenance of the area and that hold in the hearts of Washingtonians.
Yeah, it's really a nice spot, and the tennis courts and the pickleball courts are utilized, and there's always in warm weather, there's always children playing there in the playground.
Tell me a little bit about the process of pulling these sources together and getting the story of the Field Museum put together.
Well, fascinating enough, we actually hold all of the original documents here in the Brown Library archives in the John A. Wilkinson History Room. The book compiled by Elizabeth Sterling, you can see here. These were printed in very limited numbers, and we have several copies here. This really lays out the story of the organization, and we used a combination of the Washington Daily News that has now been digitized and it's searchable. And if you're looking to know more through newspapers.com, be aware it is thousands of mentions of the Bug House or the Washington Field Museum. So you're going to really need to narrow it down. There's multiple thousands of instances in multiple columns in a daily newspaper. So it was such a big deal. We come through hours and hours of research, as well as what we have here. We have the original minute books. They actually sat on a typewriter and typed up all of the minutes of all of the conversations that went on in the 1920s, 1930s. So it's a labor of love, but it means so much to the community. So when you asked us to, when your organization reached out and asked us to do this, we looked at each other and said, well, we would love to. This is one of our favorite stories to tell here in Washington, and it really, it's really a timeless story of children overcoming many obstacles, and it's still felt today.
Fun fact: this is one of the spinsters. This was her book.
Yeah. I thought I recognized the name, right? Elizabeth Yurt.
Well,
there was a Harold Yurt was his sister, and
Okay.
And Mr. Sterling was a founding member of the Bug House, and he married. It's a small town, but it was all revolved around the Bug House. And the person who owned this book, which is signed by Elizabeth, was dedicated to Elizabeth Fowl Morton, who was one of those members of the Spinsters Club.
Yeah, it was given to one of the spinsters.
So it touches all kinds of facets, and it didn't matter if you were a serviceman, a member of any of these social clubs. That building and what those young boys and girls did touched all of their lives. And I've heard of multiple people in town say that their fathers were from all over the United States, and they met their wives at the Bug House. And it was during the USO dances that they met local Washington and Beaufort County girls, and they decided to move here. So all kinds of stories. That generation is coming to an end, and we're trying to do oral interviews with anybody and everyone who can remember being associated or being a part of the original Washington Field Museum.
And I've got another comment that just came in that said, we have photos and papers on the Bug House in the museum's archives donated by Elizabeth Sterling. And we have an oral history interview with Elizabeth Sterling and Mary.
In what museum?
I think our museum library and archives.
Oh, that's cool.
I believe someone reached out yesterday, and we are very excited to go through that finding aid and hopefully glean what information we can from those archives and add it to our story. Again, anybody has anything, we'd love to see it. This is just a labor of love and a passion of ours to preserve this history of what these young men and women did, and share it and keep that history alive. It's a part of our community even to this day.
The largest amateur museum in the country was in Washington, North Carolina for 20 years. Yep. I think that's such a gem in the crown for Eastern North Carolina and the state as a part of our history. So I much appreciate you taking the time not to do this work, but also to join us here on our program.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Everybody, again, let's see. Yes, they wrote, yeah, here the Brimley Library here at the museum has those things. And but it sounds like y'all have been connected. So we can, after the program, we can make sure that those connections are made too. Keep the stories going. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in to today's edition of the Lunchtime Discovery Series. It is the last program that we're doing for the year 2025. Thank you for being with us for so many great programs, so many great speakers, lessons, stories, insights, expertise. We've had a great time, and guess what? The fun doesn't stop here. We'll be back here again in January with more Lunchtime Discovery Series. The posters are out for the January series. Head to eenorthcarolina.org. That's the website for the Office of Environmental Education. There you can sign up for the email newsletter for this lecture series specifically to get the YouTube links and information about the speakers and presentations in your inbox so you can come and join us, whether it's in person here in downtown Raleigh or online around the glow of your YouTube screens. We'd be glad to have you again for more Lunchtime Discovery Series presentations. I will see you all again very soon. Be safe. Take care out there in your holiday festivities, in your holiday cheer. And we'll see you all again real soon. Happy New Year, everybody. Bye.